Today will be lesson 7 in instructional videos for Master Kuo Lien Ying's second Northern Shaolin form, Cha Chuan. The move that we're going to learn today is a fairly difficult move, but we're going to teach a couple of different variations going from easy into the more difficult version. It's a spinning jump into the crane stance and then into the bow and arrow stance like we did in the last lesson. First I'll do a review of the second section into this jump, and then you can kind of see how that fits into the various moves. And then we'll go right into the lesson. So we'll take it from the beginning of the second section where we do the run here and then the stamp back. Then we go into the press down, high crescent kick, elbow block, the double jump kick, into the bow and arrow stance. From here, so the last two moves were the moves that we'll learn today. As we talked about in the last lesson, many of the movements in the second form, Cha Chuan, have its roots in the first form, the 10 roads of Tantui. And so I'm going back and demonstrating in some of these lessons how the new move that we're learning relates to movements that we've already learned in the previous lessons on the 10 roads of Master Kuo Lien Ying's Tantui. Lines 6 through 8, and then 9 doesn't have that, and then 10 has the into the horse stance and the bow and arrow stance. So I will take it from the Tantui and turnaround. I want to demonstrate this particular move because it's the heart of the move that we're learning today. So normally in the line, you're going to do the spin around to go in the other direction. And then you go up into the crane stance with the fist on the knee. From here, you sweep the knee with the back of the fist, step into the northern horse, and this back of the fist to the back of the fist, and then you shoot into the bow and arrow stance. And so that's done at the end of line road 6, 7, 8, and 10. And also at the end of Cha Chuan and the end of Tantui, you finish with the same movement. So this is a move that's repeated throughout his Northern Shaolin. So again, from here, when you do the turnaround, shoot up into the crane, sweep the knee, step in the horse, and then the bow and arrow. Now in this movement, you create kind of a tension between the left fist and the rear fist, and then you kind of spring and explode into the punch and the pull back. So this is going to be the heart of the movement today, because after you do the spin into this crane stance, you're going to do that same movement into the next section, into the next series of movements. So I suggest to start off, we practice that a few times so that we get the feeling of that move, because you can do, after you do the, from here, after you do the turn into the crane stance, you're going to repeat that movement. And so it's kind of the heart of the second part of this movement. So I want to kind of, let's work on that. This is kind of a technique where you work on the basic movement and then you kind of add to it. It's a little different than rote learning, because in rote learning you try to memorize it move by move by move. But here we're learning a little kind of conceptual learning here. And so from here, okay, I'm going to do it like facing the camera so you can kind of see the movement better. And then we'll place it into the direction that we need to end up. So we're actually starting with the ending move, then we're going to go back to the jump into the second move. If that makes any sense. Kind of like working backwards. And if you watch many of my videos, I talk about different techniques of learning. And sometimes, and I did talk about the fact that when you progress through a form, you're practicing the beginning of the form a lot, but when you get to the end, you only practice it a few times after you finish the form, and so those movements are not, as rooted in. And so in this technique here, where you start on the last move and you kind of work backwards, it's kind of the same principle, because that last move is kind of the heart of the movement, the end of the move. So if that makes any sense to you. Okay, so from here, you're going to the crane position, like the starting position is like this, and the ending position is like this. Okay, and then so from here, you're going to take this and sweep, and then the 2/5 sweep, horse, knees in, and then shoot out. Okay, then crane stance, sweep, sit down, shoot. Crane stance, sweep, sit down, shoot. Crane stance, sweep, sit down in a horse, shoot. Crane stance, sweep, sit down in a horse, shoot. Okay, one more time, I'll do it real slow. Crane stance, sweep, sit down in a horse, shoot. Now, when you're doing the sweep, you can start to drop into the horse as you do the sweep. You don't have to do the sweep, drop down, and do the punch. You can do it all simultaneous. And that's more how it should be performed. Here, in function, think of it as sweeping somebody's hand, grabbing your knee or leg, pulling and punching. So the sweep, like that. So that's the heart of the movement coming from the 10 roads of Tantui. So we're going to go back to the beginning position, and we have this spin into this move. And again, we're going to teach two variations, and we'll start off with a very simple spin into the crane stance so that you can get the positioning correct. So we start off from the horse here. And again, since my back is to you, I'll face this way so you can see better. From here, you're going to lock with the elbow as you slap with the left palm. Here, and you go into the cat stance. Here, 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 bow and arrow. So remember, after the double jump kick, we ended in the bow and arrow stance. So you're going to do this block. So from the bow and arrow stance, block here. Bow and arrow stance, block. Bow and arrow stance, block. Bow and arrow stance, block. You're going to be in the cat stance, and you're going to have to jump out of the cat stance and do a spin into the crane. And that's a fairly difficult move to do, and especially to land into the crane and keep your balance because you're spinning around. So I'm going to teach you a few tricks in order to learn this. Again, starting off with a very simple concept of the movement starting place, and then easy way to get into the position, into the bow and arrow. So that's how we're going to do that. From the bow and arrow stance, do the block. And then from here, take your foot, spin, and just go into the crane. Okay, you're not doing the jump. You're just getting the body and the direction correct, and that's okay. And as we get older, when I get into my 90s, this is probably the way I'll have to do it instead of doing the jump. So if there's always an easier way to do it, that's a good way to learn so that you at least get the direction and positioning right into the basic stance, okay? So again, remember the direction is going to be, we've come off the diagonal, right, into the block, and then we do the double jump kick into the bow and arrow punch. So now we do this, and then we're going to spin and turn into the crane. So the easiest way I can describe this is here, and then just go here. Now, when you're doing the crane here, although I demonstrated it facing the camera, the next series of movements is going to be on a diagonal. So where you're turning on here into the block and the double jump kick, we end up on the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, the parallel line in this bow and arrow. As you do the block and the spin, you're going to be your left shoulder going to 11 o'clock, 10 or 11 o'clock on the diagonal. So you're up on this diagonal line here. And then you're going to do sweep into the bow and arrow stance on the diagonal line. So again, let's take that again and do the slow, easy version from the bow and arrow stance, the block, spin into the crane, sweep, fist back to back, and then punch. So from the bow and arrow stance, the block, the spin into the crane, drop down, and punch. The bow and arrow stance, the block, spin into the crane, block, sweep, and then punch. I'll face the camera this way so you can better see the bow and arrow stance and then the turn into the crane. Into the block, and then turn into the crane. From the bow and arrow stance, the block, turn into the crane. So instead of like trying to spin, I'm just going to just step into the crane stance. That'll be the easiest. Here, the bow and arrow stance, the block, turn, step into the crane. Bow and arrow stance, block, turn, step into the crane. So now, the second hardest is going to be the jump into the crane stance. So I'll demonstrate that. Again, we're going back in the right direction. From the bow and arrow stance, here, and then hop into the crane stance, into the bow and arrow stance. Now, one of the things you can do, of course you want to be able to like jump into the crane and have perfect balance, but most of the time trying to perform the jump, you're going to find yourself a little bit off balance. So now you can use that bow and arrow stance to kind of help catch your balance. So it'll kind of look like this. If you get a little bit off balance on a jump, then you can go right into the bow and arrow stance. And those two movements, the jumping spin into the crane and the bow and arrow stance, can be done one right after the other. So you don't have to go into the donkey is trying to get in the picture. Go around, go around. You don't have to go into the crane and hold necessarily and then drop in the bow and arrow stance. So from here, that's how it should look like if you're doing the jump. Bow and arrow stance. Here. Block. Jump. Bow and arrow stance. Punch. Again, let's take that progression from the simplest turn and step into the crane stance and into the bow and arrow stance, and kind of like a step by step, go from the step to the jump. Okay. So again, I'm going to start with the usual position, because when I turn around, then I'll be facing you. So in the first progression, the simple one is to do the block, then do the step into the crane, sweep, drop down the horse, punch. So the next progression to get into the jump would be more to do a spin into the crane and into the bow and arrow stance. So instead of stepping into it, you do the spin. Because when you do the jump, you're going to be jumping and spinning. So to get used to kind of your balance of trying to keep yourself vertical and doing that spin. The third variation is actually the jump into the spin into the crane. Like that. And then there's one more. This is one that I aspired to for many years. And it's a much harder version of the jump into the crane stance. I think that this kind of jump spin into the crane is probably okay. But for me, in trying to kind of play with the function, I wanted to pretend that there was something behind me. I needed to jump over that object in order to get into this crane and bow and arrow. So what I did was I worked on from this position here to jump like that into the crane. And that in itself is a fairly difficult move because you're jumping into 2 feet instead of just doing the spin. So it looks like this. Again, I was a little bit off balance, so I used the bow and arrow to transition to a smoother ending. So now we're going to add a couple of previous moves in front of it to kind of lengthen out that sequence and practice it within the framework of the 4 or 5 movements. Let's take it again. As you practice the form, I always keep telling you that you don't have to practice the form from the beginning to where you are. Practicing the way that I'm showing you, learning the new move, and then working backwards is a very valid way to do your form, your Dalu practice. And so what we're doing here is we learn the hardest move, or the heart of the movement, which is the bow and arrow, right? And then we work backwards and learn the block and the jump into that. Now we're going to go backwards a little bit. We'll start off with the drop stance and the block, come up into the double jump kick, into the bow and arrow stance, and then we'll do the block, turn, crane stance, and then sitting down in a horse, and then punch, bow and arrow stance, punch. So again, from the crescent kick, you come down, and you're going to end up in this position here, and then you come forward into the elbow block, going forward into the double jump kick, into the bow and arrow punch on the right side. From here, then we're going to do the easy version like that. Okay, this time again a little bit faster from the drop stance and the block, block, so there I did the jumping spin kick, spin into the crane stance. Again, these are interchangeable, the methods that I'm teaching you, so you can tailor your practice to whatever your abilities are. Okay, that'll be it for today. It's kind of a fun move to practice. Might be difficult for a lot of people. Again, easy version is a good way to practice in the very beginning. And then as you get better at memorizing the direction, the beginning and ending moves, start to put that jump into it, and then see how you can do it. Okay, thank you.